Welcome to Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, hear about late planting considerations given the current weather conditions in the Midwest, and stick around for a couple corny jokes.
Welcome to Merchman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Lynn and Dylan on with us, and I think we have to start the conversation with late planting considerations, as the Midwest and a lot of our sales footprint has experienced rain and been keeping guys out of the field. I think that's one of the things we need to discuss. So Lynn, what do you got for us this morning?
Yeah, so when we look at Iowa, Illinois, parts of Missouri right now, what we've got kind of going on is that we're 5 days to get dry, and the rain comes every 3 days. So we're in a situation where I'm not saying that we're in panic mode yet, but it's getting a little bit questioning whether should you push the envelope yet or not. What's Mother Nature going to do? And I think right now, for all the considerations that we have and all the information that we're looking at, it's not time to panic, but you definitely should be having that conversation on what is the right moment to pull that trigger, because we're getting to the point where, 1st of May, when you're thinking about is that field ready to go or not, the opportunity cost is if it's not, we're going to run into some issues. Now we're getting to the point where it's kind of easy decision. We're getting to the end of the time frame to where if you get it and it works, great. If it doesn't, you gave it a shot. Not that big of a deal. But if the conditions do work out, one thing I think that we're looking to on our operation, we've had some discussions on maybe just shortening up that planting depth just a little bit on corn. Instead of going from 2 3/4, 2.5, maybe 2.5 to 2 1/4. On beans, we're going to be at that 1 inch mark to get them up out of the ground and get stuff moving along. So the other part with that too is that typically around here we dry out about 1 inch, 1.5 inches pretty darn quick. It's that 2nd inch where we're really running into issues on real mucky conditions, that we're running into sidewall compaction or causing some smearing in the tillage floor, adding a compaction layer there. So from a bean standpoint, I think we're actually sitting in a pretty decent spot if we can get going. Now corn, we need Mother Nature to
cooperate a little bit. Yeah, and from the pure planting date standpoint, it's not really the problem right now.
Correct.
It's what the forecast looks like for the next 10 days out.
We're going to make up a lot of time. We look at the temperatures. We're not going to max out growing degree units, but we're probably sitting at a point where we're nearing that for what we're looking at in May. Which is very similar to the situation we ran into last year when the guys that were just a little bit patient and picked their times to plant, corn was up out of the ground in 4 or 5 days. It was off to the races, and really didn't see a lot of yield variations between the stuff that was super early that maybe sat at V1, V2 for a little bit because they got out of the ground and then just didn't move because they either didn't have enough daylight or temperatures, where the ones that were a little more strategic maybe waited a little bit, got it up out of the ground, was able to use the temperature and the sunlight radiation both to enhance that plant. And the end of the year ended up coming out to wash, to maybe even those guys were a little bit ahead from a yield standpoint compared to the ones that maybe pushed it a little bit. Now, like you said, from a time standpoint, we're not there yet to panic, to make any changes in variety. Don't make any changes in hybrid. But if we keep being in the pattern of it takes 5 days to dry out, and we're only getting 3, we're getting a little bit where you should keep, at least in the back of your mind, the thought of what's plan C now, what's plan D, and have that to where you can move fast, because if we catch a window, you better be with it. You don't want to be caught with your pants down on the sideline.
You made that comment where you were talking about, it's not time to make the variety decision or the variety switch decision here, but I wanted to highlight from the Iowa State article here that a soybean variety planted 40 to 60 days apart will reach physiological maturity within 7 to 10 days of each other. Iowa State's documented that, and a whole bunch of land-grant universities have documented that. And when we do a switch from a 3.5 to a 3.0 or a 3.5 to a 2.5, it's about half the difference. So it's about 3 to 5 days difference at maturity. So keep those things in mind as this weather pattern progresses, because there's a lot of documentation on what's the difference in maturity and how fast that product. So Joe's rule of thumb is a week of planting difference results in a day at harvest. Follows rule of thumb. I mean, that land-grant universities have proved that for sure.
I think it's a little bit unique too, and it's totally anecdotal, but we've talked to guys that actually when they get later into the season, they'll push that maturity mark as full as they can get because they know they're not going to maximize the sunlight before summer solstice. So what they're going to try to do is just basically hold on to the end and catch that September, October rains, and maybe instead of not having as many nodes, they're going to have better weight on their soybean because they're going to fill out a little bit easier. So that's a consideration that, from our operation, you kind of have in the back of your head. We see it on double crop. Typically the guys with double crop that push out that maturity a little bit further to the north. Down south, they're a little bit unique that they're kind of finding a sweet spot in that 4.0 to 4.4 time. But up here, we're 3.9, 4.0, 4.2. Frost really isn't an issue, or knock on wood, hasn't been an issue in the fall, and still getting 60, 70, bushel on a potential late plant. Double crop, a little bit different because we got a crop in front of it that's using a little bit of that extra nutrition that's out there. But it's not uncommon to have guys even just south of the border here in Missouri cranking out 70, 75 bushel late planted beans. And with that, though, the strategy is that they're pacing themselves out from their harvest, that they're using their potentially their early planted stuff, they're going, and then they're waiting for the next one to kind of come where they're maturing at that staggered stage to where they're combining the first time that thing hits 15% or lower. And quality is better from a seed production standpoint. Quality is better. The ease of operations is a little bit easier when you have everything spread out, because it seems like the last 3 or 4 years here locally, a 3.2 to a 3.7 or 3.8 has all matured within about 15 minutes of each other. It seems like that. Not trying to be a salesman here, but a little bit of Mother Nature will give you a lemon. It's up to you to make a lemonade. These guys have made lemonade out of it. They've kind of spread their harvest window out a little bit, been able to take advantage of a longer fill period potentially, and the only thing that I see that's a major downside to that would be an early frost, or hypothetically if we get into a seasonality where we're really hot and dry, and maybe those beans start to kind of shut down a little bit. We don't get as much vegetative growth in that June, July time frame. We could be running into potential issues there, but right now all indications from long range weather outlooks look like we're going to turn back hot and probably wet over the summer. So I don't see moisture being that big of an issue. And to be honest, around here we have enough water holding capacity that we are at our fill going into June, and we can ride that thing for quite a while from a water standpoint.
Exactly. Dylan, what do you got on front of you?
Yeah, so I guess now that they just brought up kind of the planting maturity window with the soybeans, we're going to have that in corn too. And when we get into that weather, like into September and October, kind of the weather kind of changes a little bit. We're going to get cooler. We might catch more rains for that grain fill. Kind of some of the articles we've been reading on, it kind of says maybe end of kind of that last part of May, kind of into the first 5 so days into June. We're still sitting at a okay time frame for planting corn if you still need to get it in, because we're going to push into that September and October for that grain fill. It might catch some cooler temperatures, but then we know with this later planting corn that the roots are not going to kind of grow as big as maybe some of this early April planted corn. And then
especially if it rains every other day.
So then I think we know this corn is going to kind of catch up, kind of the same thing with the beans. We're not necessarily peaking out on our growing degree days, but we're getting pretty dang close to that 86 degrees that we're accumulating. So I think if we can get in last week of May, hopefully, and before that, obviously, I think we're still sitting at a very good spot, because we know a healthy plant is going to dry down faster and quicker than a kind of a stressed out, weak plant that's full of diseases. And
yeah, I was reading some articles from 2019 that Corteva had, and they were talking about how later planted corn has a tendency to experience more disease issues because it's going to be out in the field longer. It's going to be potentially have more rainfall, like what you were talking about, for like what Lynn was talking about too. From the long-term weather outlooks look like we're going to be warm and wet. So that's one of those things that, do everything that you possibly can to keep that corn plant healthy, keep the diseases at a lower level, because it's one of those things right now that we're talking about a lot of gambling. We're talking about a lot of things that are way far out in front of us, but they're all affected by what happens in the next 2 weeks here. So,
and when we look at 2019 for us locally, the guys in Illinois a little bit, they experienced it, but now for probably most of Merschmann's footprint, the inoculum of tar spot is an X factor that plays into, as we get later, potentially in the season and the wet warm happens, or you're green later into the season, and if you don't have it and that inoculum blows in, or whatever you have, it's really important, as we've looked at plots when evaluating different hybrids, the green stuff always looks like it has a really bad tar spot, but the reason it's green is because it
has
held
tolerance.
on.
Yep.
And the stuff that didn't look like it was that bad, it was into senescence, probably really didn't hit senescence when it wanted to. It hit it because the tar spot took over the plant, and you could really tell in the yield side of stuff that stuff held on longer, was able to get through grain fill a little easier, or didn't have as much stress during grain fill, and the yield was subjected to that. So I think that's something that 2019 for most of our growing area, now the guys in, like I said, Illinois and Indiana probably would try to punch us through the screen talking about this, but that's a new factor that we have to probably think about for the most of Merschmann's growing areas, that we're potentially set up to have a pretty gnarly tar spot year if this stuff all carries through. So when you're taking that into consideration, make sure that you're booking your fungicide and taking care of that plant just like you would any other year, because to your point, a sick plant is going to dry down slower than a healthy plant.
Exactly. One of the other things that I was thinking about was row spacing and canopy closure. That becomes very important. So if guys have like two different planters and they wanted to slam beans in, or they wanted to put beans in as fast as they can, Joe has always talked about how planting beans in a 15-inch row versus a 30-inch row gains you 2 weeks in like planting window because of yield potential. So North Carolina Soybean Producers Association has a graph here that I wanted to show that talks about planting date and not lapped, not tall enough. That they did this for like double crop purposes, but there's a graph here that shows exactly what Joe is talking about. You want that bean to reach canopy as fast as possible. You want to take advantage of as much sunlight as possible. So higher planting populations and narrow row spacings is definitely something that if a producer has the ability to use that narrower row space or just increase the population, it's definitely going to help at this point in time to maintain some of the yield potential.
Yeah, I think when we were discussing here off air beforehand, looking at beans like the Kennedy is a stable product up north and south. We're probably looking to be at that. If you're normally in that 135, probably now looking at 140. If we're getting into the next week, probably 145. If you're in 15s and like the Monroe or more of a mainline bean, if you were at 150, we're probably 155, pushing 160. Eisenhower's, if you're on some marginal dirt, maybe even getting into that 170,000 mark there to just try to compensate with those factors. So
right.
It's not a bad time to do some population trials too, if you think you want to either prove a university right or wrong, because most planners hit the button and you're good to go. So, but just some considerations there. I think we definitely we are at that point where I don't feel comfortable in a 30-inch row spacing being at that 120,000 anymore. We want to get those plants stacked in and try to get to that canopy, because most likely if we get into June, if the weather stays the way that's going to be, we're probably not going to get complete row closure on most 30s. I think most guys are probably going to see those leaves start to kind of come together. You can still kind of pick the row up, but then as soon as we get either the peak summer heat or as we get closer to senescence, we'll see those kind of pull back.
Right. Yep. 15-inch and 7-inch rows are like drilled plants are definitely going to be the desired row spacing once we get a little bit later in the season here. So, Since Joe is not with us, Lynn, do you have a corny joke to take us out of here?
I have two. I'm gonna pick on you a little bit. Your dad's in the construction business, so you'll have some inside information on this, maybe not. But do you know how much a chimney costs? No clue?
No clue.
Nothing?
No.
No? No? Not even a guess?
No. Nothing.
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 You're correct. It's on the house.
Nice.
You can go home and tell your dad that if you want. See if he agrees.
Yeah.
All right, and the last one is it's a shout out to my daughter. So in kindergarten right now, they're having a letter of the day. So they're going through the alphabet, and on I think it was Wednesday, was J. So J was jokes. She had to take in a joke. So I thought she did a pretty decent job of picking one out. We're gonna find out if Finley watches Dad on TV or not. So, why did the student eat his homework?
No idea.
Because the teacher told him it was a piece of cake.
Very good. We'll see if Joe approves. Okay, we hope everybody that's watching and listening is staying safe, and hopefully find some opening windows here in the next couple weeks to get their crops finished up. And we will catch you all next week.